Hi everyone, welcome back to day 3 of Unit 4. Today we're going to cover usability test again, as far as how to identify problems with your website and how to develop scenarios that your users will use during your usability test. So let's start off with some things to make sure you have in this assignment. And these are also some common pitfalls. These first checkpoints you see are very common errors made in this assignment. The first thing you want to do is make sure you're writing to your client, the website owner or owners. So you want to have names and contact information. You want to think of including client-themed colors and logos. So for instance, if you were hoping to redesign an OU website, you would probably have a lot of crimson and cream. You also want to have a formal cover page and a table of contents. Please don't forget the table of contents. Also, don't assume your client knows this assignment or the requirements. Treat this like an actual redesign proposal. Make sure your introduction provides a nice summary of who your client is as a brand and what the goal of their website might be for. So in other words, show the client / designer that you know what they're about, you know what they're trying to do for their users, and they should listen to you to become more successful as far as creating a user-friendly website. And make sure your critiques are geared towards the brand identity of the website you're dealing with. A big, huge note here is critique, but do not insult. This may seem very self-explanatory, and it may seem like an obvious statement to make, but it's important to note that in a proposal like this, your client may not necessarily realize your intention isn't to insult if that's the tone used in your proposal. So as you're writing it, you're probably trying to be constructive and give constructive criticism. But if that doesn't come through in your rhetorical choices and in your tone, you've lost your client. Side note here, this also goes for any sort of interaction you have with anyone, especially things like emails with professors, conversations with bosses, things like that. Tone is everything. Intent doesn't matter if it's not executed through your rhetoric and your tone. Also, make sure you build your proposal for scannability, but also depth. So have a mixture of paragraphs and bullets and pictures as well. Don't have huge block paragraphs only. Don't have bulleted list only. Don't have pictures only. Have a mixture. Your client has no idea what a usability test is, nor do they know what good website design is. So you have to teach them these things. You have to unpack all of the information concerning the usability of the website and why redesign is necessary. Don't just make up information. Cite best practices and cite from our readings. Perhaps cite me from these PowerPoints or one of the slides from these PowerPoints. Each problem should show a possible solution. So again, this kind of goes back to the difference between critiquing and insulting. Pointing out a problem is more not helpful, right? It's pretty unhelpful. Go beyond that. Say, yes, this is a problem right now, but I have a way to fix it. Here's why you should listen to me. Use a template or mimic one. Images are incredibly important. So just as with your instruction set, you want to label images with arrows pointing to key attributes. You want to provide captions and refer to figures in your body text. Also, please don't forget to number your pictures with figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, so on and so forth. Now then, hopefully this will help you all as you're looking at your websites. Here are Jacob Nielsen's top 10 mistakes in web design. The first one is using frames. So this is splitting a page into frames, which is very confusing for users since frames break the fundamental user model of the web page. So think of the Lowe's page we looked at earlier this week. I was looking for a tub, and that frame break made me have to scroll through unnecessary information to get to where I wanted to go. Also, with frames, sometimes you run into some issues like users can't bookmark the current page and return to it. Maybe the bookmark points to another version of the frame set. Perhaps URLs stop working and printouts become difficult. Even worse, the predictability of user actions goes out the door. Who knows what information will appear where when you click on a link? The next common error is gratuitous use of bleeding edge technology. So clients don't want to try to attract users to their site by bragging about use of the latest web technology. They might attract some people, but mainstream users will care more about useful content and the ability to offer good customer service. Using the latest and greatest before it is even out of beta is a sure way to discourage users. If their system crashes while visiting the website, you can bet that many of them won't be back. So unless your client is in the business of selling internet products or services, it's better to wait until some experience has been gained with respect to the appropriate ways of using new techniques. Okay, number 3, scrolling text, marquees, and constantly running animations. This is a pretty common one. You don't want to include elements that move incessantly. Moving images have an overpowering effect on human peripheral vision, and a web page should not emulate Times Square in its constant attack on the human senses. Users need some peace and quiet to actually read text. And of course, on that note, the blink coding is absolutely terrible. It's a great example of why Nielsen considers this a very common mistake. Next, we have complex URLs. So even though machine level addressing like the URL should never have been exposed in the user interface, it is there. Users sometimes need to type in a URL, so websites should try to minimize the risk of typos by using short names with all lowercase characters and no special characters. Orphan pages. You may run into quite a few orphan pages on local websites. So you want to make sure that all pages on your website include a clear indication of what website they belong to, since users may access pages directly without coming in through the homepage. For the same reason, every page should have a link up top as well as some indication of where the page fits into the structure of the entire website. Long scrolling pages. All critical content and navigation options should be on the top part of the page. Users will scroll only if they believe that there is something useful lower down the page. So think of OU's College of Engineering website, which we looked at Monday. This is a great example of a long scrolling page. Next is lack of navigation support. This is important because clients have to get away from assuming users know as much about their website as the client does. They always have difficulty finding information, so users need support in the form of a strong sense of structure and place. This is why the navigation bar is vital. So you want websites that have a sitemap and let users know where they are and where they can go. So think of Krug's trunk test here. If you've been dropped into the abyss of a website, a user should be able to figure out where they are and how to get where they want to be. Next is non-standard link colors. We'll skip over that one because it's not as important. Outdated information. This is a pretty big one. Information needs to be up to date on websites. And overly long download times. That one's just annoying. Okay, so now you are looking at something called an empathy map. Empathy maps are really helpful before starting usability test because they let you figure out more about your user. So from Solutions IQ, an empathy map is a collaborative tool teams can use to gain a deeper insight into their customers/users. Much like a user persona, an empathy map can represent a group of users, such as a customer segment. So it's like an amplified user persona. I encourage all of you to make empathy maps for Unit 4. However, they aren't required in any of your projects. So how would you construct an empathy map? You might ask questions such as, what would the user be thinking and feeling? What are some of their worries and aspirations? What would their friends, colleagues, and boss be likely to say while the user is using the website? What would the user hear? What would the user see while using the website in their natural environment? What might the user be saying and or doing while using the website? How would that change in a public or private setting? What are some of the user's pain points or fears when using the website, or maybe websites in general? What gains might the user experience when using the website? These maps allow you to get out of what I call the designer mode and into the user mode. Okay, so here you see some example introductions that could work well for this assignment. Keep in mind, these are truncated introductions. Yours would be more fleshed out. I want to draw your attention to this one because this was inspired by the College of Engineering's webpage. Although, side note there, they have improved the webpage quite a bit over the past little while. This we'll come back to because it's an introduction from an example scenario we'll talk about a little later on. Okay, now then let's actually talk about scenarios. So scenarios are important for usability test because they guide what your users actually do. They give a little bit of a framework so you can get the best possible results from your usability test. So scenarios are meant to create realistic activities or tasks for your users to perform during the usability test that engage the possible errors of the site. So you want to start with the goals of the actual website. What's the website trying to do? How is it trying to help its users? Then you want to put those goals into a realistic context and add constraints, right? So your constraints are where your website is going awry. Your constraints are the errors you've isolated. So think about goals here. Let's say you want to see how easy it is to browse and purchase from Nike's website. A poor task would be purchase a pair of orange Nike running shoes. A better task would be buy a pair of shoes for under $40. Notice this second task accomplishes both parts of the user goal, which is browsing product offerings and purchasing an item. Another example of this would be, let's say you are running a usability test over Fandango and your goal is to find movie and show times. You realize that that is very difficult to do on Fandango's website. So a poor task might be, user, you want to see a movie Sunday afternoon. Go to fandango.com and tell me where you'd click next. A better task would be, user, use fandango.com to find a movie you'd be interested in seeing this Sunday. The reason that's a slightly better task is because it's better to ask the user to do the action rather than asking them how they would do the action. So if you ask, how would you find a way to do X? Or tell me how you would do Y. The participant is likely to answer in words, not actions, and you don't get the results you want. And also an unfortunate side effect of asking is that people's self-reported data isn't always as accurate as when they actually use the system. So you want to see them perform actions, not tell you what they would do. Okay, and here's a great example scenario that worked really well in a former class. So the spring semester is coming to a close and you're planning on moving to a new house across town with your 4 roommates. Only one of you has a car and you all decide that it would be too much of a hassle and too much gas money to try to drive back and forth. So one of your roommates suggests that it would be easier to rent a truck for the day to move across town. You're familiar with Penske trucks to a certain degree and you want to go to their website and try to rent one of their trucks. The trouble is you don't know where the nearest trunk rental site is near, so without using the search bar, try and locate what location you would rent your truck from in your area. Now, notice with this scenario, you have a backstory. You have an entire scene that your user can connect with. Then you get into an actual scenario that will lead your user to perform actions instead of saying, well, here's what I would do, right? I would go here, then I would do this, then I would call. You're giving them a scenario that makes them perform an action. Hey everyone, thank you for sticking with me this week. We will have one more video today where I actually walk through an example assignment and we'll talk about why it works so well. And we'll also go over the prompt a little bit more. Thanks. Have a good day.